Hey, let's talk about basketball or football, flag football this year. What's the new thing? You have 3 8th graders on your team and the rest are 7th graders. But what are my 3 8th graders? And he goes, it's team leaders. And what have you been doing? Well, because we know the plays that you designed because you've been coaching for years. We teach them to the 7th graders. We work with 7th graders on their skills to help them. I go, so, and what's the other thing we do on the field? Well, the team leaders have to be vocal. We have to be talking to each other on the field. You should be standing there. This is why you do it, blah, blah, blah. So is that leadership? And he goes, yeah, that's leadership. That's what I care about.
Amplify enough the importance of those leadership skills on the field and how they translate to the rest of life. Like being a leader on a football field in 8th grade and teaching plays to the 7th grade team, to me, I think correlates to how you show up as a dad, passing lessons on to your family. And I think, like you said before, when people look at leadership, they think of, hey, this Steve Jobs-esque, definition of a leader, but they forget that, you can still be a leader for yourself. Like, even if you don't have anyone to lead, you can still show up and lead yourself.
3, 2, 1.
Here we go.
Welcome back to this episode of No Half Cakes podcast. With me today is a gentleman who is right here from my hometown, a gentleman who I have worked with personally for years and has been a shining example of someone who goes above and beyond to do the right thing and really focus on impact instead of income. And to be honest with you, it has been an example that I have leaned on a number of times for how to show up and serve your community, and it still shows as an example to me that I look up to as far as hey, how do you go out and just pour back into your community, not just show up and get a job and get some money, but how do you really genuinely serve that community? And this is a man who is a business owner, who's a dad, who is a leader in business, not just for himself, but an example for other people, and is like the epitome of everything we talk about here at No Have Cakes, right? How to show up as a leader for yourself, your family, your community. And I would be silly not to have George here with you and to just share the depth of expertise this man has to offer. So without further delay, George, I'm going to butcher your last name because I honestly, Andriopoulos.
That's it.
All right, look, I did it. Proud of myself there. All right, George Andriopoulos. Love you, brother. Thank you for joining me here.
Appreciate you, brother. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm super excited.
My pleasure, man. My pleasure. So I just, I said a lot of things there. I meant every single damn one of them. You have been an example that I've seen and watched over the years. We've known each other for a long time. Where does the drive come from for you to continue to just pour in and to just do so much for the community?
Yeah, I don't know, man. I think anything I say here is going to be a little self-serving, right? Because it feels good to do good, and I didn't really realize that until what I call act 2 of my life, right? Which was past 31, 32 years old when things kind of went crazy for me in life and was in a position where I kind of had to start over. I had left a career that it was all I knew for many, many years. I was in the middle of divorce with 2 little kids and was left with nothing, meaning just starting over, rebuilding relationships, focusing just on my kids and just being the best father I could. And, for us, we come from a town called Farmingdale on Long Island in New York. We both grew up here. And for me, I always appreciated where I grew up, but it wasn't until everything kind of fell apart for me and I reimagined myself. I restarted my life here, and this town kind of took me back in and lifted me up. And I knew immediately, within the first year of this transformation, that if it was doing this for me, that I needed to give back as much as I could. And I think that's kind of where it started for me with community, because you say community to me, I say Farmingdale. But that grew into community, just being the people around me or the people that might need my help or the people that I can lean on for help. So it's grown past just my hometown, but I definitely have a special place in my heart for my hometown. But that's kind of where it started. Farmingdale lifted me up when I needed it the most. And so I kind of vowed internally to just do whatever I could to lift it in times of need.
That's amazing. So is there anything that you could point to as a really defining moment in that community building where the community kind of accepted you back and gave you that feeling of love and support where you kind of look to pass on now for other people?
Yeah, it was small to begin with. Honestly, it was little acts of running into people that I had known growing up. Right, I was going through a divorce in my hometown with somebody that I grew up with, and so it was a little touch and go during that situation. But when I kind of restarted everything and running into people who were not just everyday people in the community, maybe business owners, maybe um, people that had a little bit of juice in the community, to kind of run into them, and they see what I'm doing as I restart my business. And I don't know, they were just accepting, like, hey man, like, life happens, you're starting over, it's all good. um, and that was the first step for me of kind of like, okay, I guess I don't have to be defined by my mistakes. And if I just keep becoming the man that I always knew that I had the potential to be, then maybe I'll get past this phase of thinking. Because it was just a tough phase at the time internally of just, you don't feel like the best dude. You weren't the best version of yourself at the time, and you're coming off of that, and you come back home, and you worry that people's perspectives of you are not the best. You worry that people don't trust you, and sort of seeing people offering that trust again was kind of the first step. And then as I grew my business, my first office was smack in the middle of the village here. um, and as you grow your business, and people kind of take note that you're there to be a person of service and not just another person trying to make money, it was like, okay, cool. We can use a hand here, we can use a hand there. So it was just really acceptance was the first piece of it. And then when I got in the position, which was pretty quickly once I launched my company, when I got in the position to be able to kind of give back, and use my resources to give back to the community, to do good things beyond um, just the work that I do on a daily basis, that's when kind of things kind of shifted in a big way. When I might have, for lack of a better term, became a pillar really in the community that people can lean on for support.
Yeah, well, I'll endorse that. So you don't have to make it up. Yeah, 100%. I'll give you pillar status. You're certainly a person I know has got the community like right in the heart, and that's something that you can't fake. Right, you can't fake that funk. That's a result of showing up every day and doing the right thing, and being there with intentionality in that relationship and the little things. And I think you touched on that before. It's not always this like great big grand effort that someone puts on. It's the little touches, the small check-ins, the hey, how you doing? Hey, I'm here for you. Hey, what's up? I think, and when you look at that and expand it beyond just your local community, but the people that you talk to outside of that, the relationships you have. Look, we're in this digital realm where people have friendships and relationships all throughout the world. But it's those little touches, the little genuine, hey, how you doing? How can I show up for you today? Questions that I think make that impact and give you that community to fall back on. And, I think there's a lot to say there that if you didn't intentionally pour into the community throughout your life up to that point, like maybe that community is not really going to be there for you in the same way, right? It's sort of like investing in the relationship bank, right? You are always continuing to pour into those relationships over time and showing up as yourself. Maybe if you weren't the same version of you that you are today, you were still impactful enough those people's lives that they actually gave a crap and they cared about you to check in and say, hey, how are you? So I think it goes to the importance of having those relationships and the little things, the little touches, the check-ins, the genuine intentionality of relationships.
Yeah, for sure. And I love the one thing you brought up about sort of the size of those acts, because that's something I've been thinking about a lot lately. I'm in the middle of right now. I'm not going to sit here and advertise it, but it's just because I've been introspection lately. In the middle of writing my first book right now, and I've had to kind of, as I go chapter through chapter, pieces of it are, it's a guidance book, right? In general, it's not a memoir per se, but I use a lot of personal stories. And the one thing that I talk about a lot is leadership. And leadership means a lot to a lot of people. For me, it's always been it's a very simple definition. It's the person that stands up and says, I'll do it, right? It's either I'll do it for you, I'll do it with you, I'll teach you how to do it, I'll do it alongside you, whatever that means, I'll do it. But for me, like, learning about leadership and then accepting a role as a leader and discovering what type of leader you are, that was kind of the genesis of like, okay, I took those first few steps, those first couple of years coming out of this bad time in my life. But once things start happening, now you got to keep evolving. You got to keep growing so that you can keep being that person of service and help even more people. And so kind of discovering that process along the way and then labeling it, like putting it down on paper to go like, okay, I need to like document this because I think I can help people with this. And the one part of it to me that stuck out was the beginning, which I like to call unconventional journeys to leadership, where people sometimes don't really understand because they look at leadership as this big grand thing. They don't understand how small it can be, and they also don't understand how leadership comes about, right? And you see a guy like Steve Jobs out there that changed the world in effect, but like when you hear about his story, that was not a conventional path to leadership, right? So I always try and tell people like you can start with the smallest little step, right? I did these two things during a couple of year period early on in Act 2 of my life. One of them was that I co-founded a nonprofit that aids families financially who are in medical crisis. That's a big thing, right? And we helped a lot of families. I also, in that same period of time, I volunteered to coach my son's basketball team. And you look at those two acts and you go, well, which one's bigger, right? Because that's our natural frame of mind sometimes when you look at two things to compare them. Well, obviously, you're going to look at the nonprofit thing and go, that's bigger. And then I go, well, why? Why is it bigger? Because I volunteered to coach my son's kindergarten basketball team when this all started. And I didn't know what I was doing. I love basketball. I love playing basketball. I never coached a team before. And I just wanted to have fun, I remember one of the first things that I taught the kids was this game I made up called Scrambled Eggs, which you shoot the ball, I grab the rebound, they're all running around, I tell them to freeze, and then I pass it to one to shoot. And that was the extent of year one, right, of coaching. And then you grow as a coach, they grow as players, they get older. So, it's 8 years later, and I'm still coaching his basketball team. And the few players that have started with me still ask me in 8th grade, 13-year-olds, to play scrambled eggs, right? So you look back at the influence that you've had over these kids over the years, and you go, well, why was the nonprofit thing bigger? Because what if I had so much influence on a kid that they stuck with basketball when they were never supposed to be a basketball player? And what if that kid then dedicates themselves to basketball because they love this game so much? And what if this game gives them the opportunity to now go to college with a scholarship where they would not have been able to afford it? And what if this kid moves on to become an attorney and then a judge and then a justice, for the Supreme Court, and changes the landscape of our legal system? Like you look at the domino effect of these things, you go, one thing's not bigger than the other. Start small. Do the thing. There was no coaches available. I'll do it. And maybe I can create some change there. So I just love that you pointed that out, Jim, because that's kind of how I look at things at a very granular level. Don't look at what you think the end result might be. Just do it because it feels like the right thing to do. All that stuff comes later on.
Yeah, 100%. And first of all, congratulations for making that commitment, because that is probably one of the biggest impacts you could have is in kids' lives.
Oh, yeah.
Like we don't know what those kids are going to grow up to be and to do, right? But you do know at least they've had some interaction with a man who shows up as a leader in his family and his community, and they've seen a definition of what's possible. So when they go out into the world, they understand, hey, I can do it like this, right? This is what possibility looks like. I can do this. I can do that. I can show up and coach my own kids. I can be a leader in the community and a business and a husband and a dad. I can do all those things because they've seen an example of it, right? And I think for those kids, like, yeah, a lot of people discount that as, oh, you're just going to coach the kids. And when you're coaching kindergarten basketball, probably K through 2, it's a mess. They're probably scoring 6 points for the whole game. Yep. But it's fun. And if you don't start there, you don't get to go through the process, right? And so we look at what's the impact? Is it going to give us this payoff immediately? And we're all in that Amazon Prime mentality where we want that stuff and we want it to arrive in 2 hours.
Yep.
Right, but that's not what it's about. It's about doing the best you possibly can today, right? So I agree 100%, man.
Yeah, yeah, it's and that side of things too, kind of working with younger minds like that. And it's like you said, it's silly at the onset, right? K through 2 was like a disaster. It's just kids running around, and you leave there with a headache, and by the end of the season, you feel good that you did it. And you only did it for your kid initially, but now it turns into this thing where you go, okay, now they're getting a little bit older. Maybe I can help them with other things. And now my teams know, because I coach uh, basketball, I coach flag football, and a director for PAL for like 4 different grade levels for basketball. And all of my kids know when they go on my team, I don't care about wins and losses. That stuff comes when this works.
Right.
I care about sportsmanship and leadership, So it was very cool this year. My son, I'll brag for a minute as a dad. My son got into National Junior Honor Society this year, and he was filling out his application when they invited him. And he asked me about certain parts, like moments of leadership and blah blah blah. And his teacher specifically said, you can't just put "I play sports," you know. Um, so we fill the thing out. We do a lot of charitable work as a family together. Ronald McDonald House, LICAP, all kinds of nonprofits that we do charitable work with. But when we talked about leadership, I go, hey, let's talk about basketball. What's or football, flag football this year? What's the new thing? You have 3 eighth graders on your team, and the rest are 7th graders. So what are my 3 eighth graders? And he goes, it's team leaders. And what have you been doing? Well, because we know the plays that you design, because you've been coaching for years. We teach them to the 7th graders. We work with 7th graders on their skills to help them, with running and juking and this and that. I go, so, and what's the other thing we do on the field? Well, the team leaders have to be vocal. We have to be talking to each other on the field. You should be standing there. This is why you do it, blah, blah, blah. So is that leadership? And he goes, yeah, that's leadership, and that's what I care about. Whether it's coaching football or working with a mentee or just doing any of the work I do, it's all I care about is teaching people the things that were so hard for me to learn, man. It took me 30 plus years to learn through trials and tribulations and just the worst times ever. And you go, okay, let me see if I can give people these tools way ahead of time so they could be ahead of the curve.
Yeah, and I don't think you can amplify enough the importance of those leadership skills on the field and how they translate to the rest of life. Like being a leader on a football field in 8th grade and teaching plays to the 7th grade team, to me, I think correlates to how you show up as a dad, passing lessons on to your family, or in a business, passing lessons on to your employees, or anywhere you go. Like, a thing because you've learned it, right? The 8th graders have learned the plays ahead of the 7th graders. They know it a little bit better. So they're showing up, they're communicating extra to everyone on the team. And I think, like you said before, when people look at leadership, they think of, hey, this Steve Jobs-esque, definition of a leader, but they forget that, like, you can still be a leader for yourself. Like, even if you don't have anyone to lead, right? If you don't have a partner, you don't have a family, you don't have a business, you're just yourself, right? You can still show up and lead yourself. You can still make an impact by talking to yourself, by coaching yourself, by learning, by getting around other people, right? And you progress to the next level. You've got yourself a family, a business, whatever it is. You got people around you. Give them an example to follow. Right? I think people forget that being a leader, like, to me, the core definition of leadership is giving people an example to follow, right? And that's, you don't have to have followers to be a leader. You have to be a leader to have followers.
Yeah.
So I think, when you show up as that, when you are the one who's like, hey, I'll go first. Yeah, that's where being a leader is. And sometimes it's lonely in the front. But I think that's where having community, right, having people around you to support you in that lonely process, people to give you an example of what's possible, I think gives people that real nudge that they need to go out and do it. And that's where that big change comes from. It's all these little micro changes, these people who stand up and they're like, hey, I want a better life for myself. I'll go first. So, man, congratulations for doing that. That's
No, I
the impact of
appreciate it,
that
man.
is huge.
And I guess the realization of it is creating leaders that'll do it better than yourself. Because for me, there's nothing better than that. I lost my ego a long time ago. And I can still, in the moments when I need to kind of stand up and be the man, right, and kind of take charge, like, that guy's not lost. He doesn't need to come out as much really anymore, because I build teams around me. I build people around me, and in a lot of instances, they can do it better than me, because they kind of took the baton and figured it out for themselves. So that makes me the proudest now. I'm a long game guy. I always play the long game to a fault. I don't care about the instant gratification now because I cared about it so much back in the day. I learned that that was the thing that I needed to drop first. So, the realization of it is just incredible. I look at my life and the people that I feel like I've impacted. Like, we talk about that football team. We had amazing moments this season. We lost in the playoffs in a heartbreaker last week, 47-46. Um, we're not going to talk about the refs, but okay, let's move on from that. But we lost in a heartbreaker. But the best moment of the season was a few weeks ago when we were in a blowout win. And I'm the coach that's going to, I'm going to start kneeling. We're going to back off. We're going to, it's youth football. So we're not trying to embarrass anybody here. But we were blowing the other team out. And I see my leaders who I took out of the game, right, so that everybody else can get a chance to do their thing. I see my leaders on the sidelines strategizing plays to specifically get every single kid on the team a touchdown or an extra point or whatever. And I looked at that and I was like, season's won. That's it.
Yep.
It's all that this was about, But even back in the day that I remember when I had no clue what was going on in leadership when I was in the pharmacy industry years ago, the first part of my journey, and a mentee of mine or a guy that looked at me as a mentor, years later, I find out the guy went out and started this like $500 million company that, that just is kicking ass and really like created waves in the industry. And you look at moments like that and you're like, yeah, good, good. Everybody else is succeeding. That's what this is about.
Yeah, 100%. That's awesome you said that, because I think so much, especially for youth sports, is such a good example. Like, how do you define the win, right? The win is not, did you win or lose the last game in the playoffs? Because a lot of people look at that and they're like, oh, this sucks. We had a terrible year. No, like in the scheme of things, the win or loss you get in that season of PL sports or whatever league it is,
Yep.
It doesn't count for much. But if you learned skills like how to strategize and lead for your team, it's going to take you way freaking further than whether you won or lost that playoff game.
Yep.
But I think that's a really important lesson for those kids to learn. And I think even more so for the parents to learn, because I think a lot of times when you look at that, a lot of the kids, I think, are further ahead than their parents are. Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah. We've been dealing with it now, and we won't get into like political talks and stuff like that, but our community in the last couple of years, really since a little bit before the pandemic with elections and all that kind of stuff, was just really torn apart. And the saddest part was the influence that it had on the kids in the community, right? There was political arguments going on. There was arguments regarding the pandemic and safety protocols and everything. And however you feel about it, that's your thing. And ultimately, I was always the kind of guy that can take a step back and go, even when I was frustrated, to go like, okay, everybody's here fighting for their kids. Ultimately, that's what we're doing here. Nobody is out here trying to willfully be malicious for the purpose of being malicious. Well, maybe some people, but ultimately we're all just fighting for our kids. But the thing that made me saddest was that, when you see people having those fights for their kids, how they had those fights and the examples they were giving to their children. And it was tough, man, to watch. It was one of those moments where I tried to lead so many times in my community, and even I didn't act sometimes the way that I wanted to in those moments. And it teaches you a lot. It teaches you a lot. So yeah, but when you look at even us, like when you look at the tools we were given as kids growing up, and then how you kind of build on that and evolve and grow from that. We weren't all necessarily given the best tools growing up, right? Like our parents were our parents, and they grew up in a certain time and they had the tools of that time. And then it's up to us to kind of take that next step and grow from it and become a different person, right? A better person. That's why our parents did what they did. And you just feel sad sometimes when people don't necessarily have enough tools to be able to understand that to go to the next level.
Yeah. I think that's an important point too. Like, to me, when you say that, it makes me think of when you were talking about letting the ego go. I think a lot of people look at how far I can go because I'm trying to prove a point, or I'm trying to see how far I can go to reach whatever accomplishment I can. To me, I think being a servant leader, being a great example of what's possible, is more about how far can we go that we raise the freaking standard so high that everyone around me after I'm gone, because realistically, like, we're not going to be here forever, right? We're in an optimal state where we can impact people now. We're not going to be here forever, right? Tomorrow's not promised for any of us. But if we can do so freaking much now that we raise the standard and give other people the tools, right, to multiply out, to impact out, that's what it's about. It's not about how far can George go, so that one day when I'm standing at George's funeral, hopefully in a long ass time from now, like, I'd say, oh, George did this and that. No, man, that room is going to be full of people who are like, man, he gave me the tools to go out and I impacted this many people. Like, that's what it's about to me. And I agree, man. So doing the thing, like giving the kids the example, it sucks. Sometimes it's uncomfortable because their parents may not necessarily have had those same options. And it puts them in a real tough spot because the parents didn't learn that. So they're learning it from their kids. But if we don't do this now, right, if we don't step up and be the leader for the community and be the leader for the kids and give them the example of what's possible, the result is we have another generation of parents who grow up who didn't have that.
Yeah.
Or we can step up and be in the uncomfortable spot now, give those kids that, and then that generation grows up to be parents. Man, how much further can they impact? It's phenomenal.
Well, that's
So,
legacy.
I agree.
That's legacy, and it's not only that, but you build on legacy. You look at legacy in a number of different ways. For me, legacy used to be one thing, and it is a completely different thing now. I'm building my companies for the legacy of my children, not for the companies. They don't need to take over this isn't 1953 where I'm like, oh, you're going to take over the family business. That's not what it's about. It's providing them the resources to do their own thing, whether they go work for somebody, whether they become advocates in something, whether they start their own thing, whatever it is. I'm just showing you how I did this. Now, if you could take these resources and use them, to further grow, it's all yours, right? But legacy is, you look at it like the term generational wealth, which a lot of people don't understand what generational wealth is. It's not about becoming wealthy and then leaving your kids a bunch of money so that they can be wealthy. It's about learning how to accumulate wealth and setting your family up so that they can then do the same thing and then take it further. Well, there's generational wealth, and then there's generational legacy, generational leadership. You can apply generational wealth and the concepts behind it to all of those things, teaching them these tenets of leadership that you have learned, teaching them how to be a person of service better than you, right? And that's what it's about. But there's also generational ignorance, because some people are just completely fine not changing, taking what they have learned and not growing on it. In fact, hating the idea of changing and growing on it. And that's where we can get stagnant sometimes. And none of us are perfect, man. I'm sure you and I both get in those modes sometimes where we're like, I just don't have the energy. It's fine the way it is, right? But eventually we get out of that.
Yeah. I think it's definitely human, right? We're all human to get stuck sometimes and to just feel worn, right? To feel like sometimes you just wish you had that instant gratification, because it does get tiring. But I think that's the important part of having that community, of having those relationships around you who continue to like lift you up and remind you of, hey, look at the impact you've had. One of the things, which might sound cheesy, that I do is I'll save screenshots or recordings of things that I've accumulated over time of impact that I've gotten back. And sometimes I'll get in a spot where I just have to go and thumb through it and be like, oh yeah, this person did this because of that. And it reminds you, like, yeah, you are having a big impact. And even though you're not getting that instant gratification, like, you remember, all right, cool, the payoff is worth it. The payoff is worth it. And it gives you a little bit of energy to kind of keep going and keep pouring back in.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I love that.
So speak to me, if you will, on what the next iteration is for you. Like, where are things going from here?
It's interesting, man. I started, so we're right now, this 2023, and we're actually coming up in a couple of weeks, is the 10-year anniversary of my company, Launchpad 516. The company that started with me and a part-time assistant renting 2 desks in somebody else's office. And, here we are 10 years later. And it has become this thing that I can't even name anymore. It started as a management consulting firm, and in my really compartmentalized brain, every time I tried to add on services, I would start a new company. And it's like 5-6 years ago, I have like 6 different companies. I'm like, what are we doing here? And the pandemic gave me a lot of clarity in just being home with my family for 18 months, my office just collecting dust and cobwebs, and when I came back, I had this different energy where people started to use this term pivot, right, during the pandemic. For me, I had been pivoting for years. I changed it to evolution, evolving. Let's evolve this company, right? So dropped services that no longer served us, started adding other services, and it just became this thing that Launchpad is whatever it needs to be at the. It's a business success company. I call it Consulting Plus because there's no real framework around the company. It's whatever a client needs it to be to help grow a business. But that has just become now a platform for me to be able to do other things. So, as a person that tries to create influence and tries to share my story with people, I'm a public speaker. I've been for years. I got into the TED world for a number of years. I've done 3 TEDx talks. I became a producer for TED. I did 4 TEDx Farmingdale events. I co-produced 2 TED Women events. And over those last few years doing that, I kind of realized that I could do something different here. I think I could evolve past what TED is trying to do and sort of cater to I guess what I thought public speaking should be as just one person's opinion. But I noticed some gaps in that whole market. TED being a brand that creates authority for speakers. I noticed that it was a little limiting in terms of who could speak at these types of events because not every subject matter really pertains to a TED type of talk. So we started conceptualizing a couple of years back our own platform. We named it Speak, fittingly. And in 2022, we launched Speak as a global public speaking platform for people with ideas and stories. So this is where my focus has been. I'm lucky enough where I can kind of let Launchpad do its thing, step aside from that in order to go back into startup mode and start this new thing. So it's been a lot of fun launching this. And we are a global speaking platform. We've done events in the United States from New York to Dallas. We just did our first international event in Belfast, Northern Ireland in October. We actually just passed a couple of days ago our 1-year anniversary of our first show, and we're bringing it back home to where it all started to do our 1-year anniversary show on November 30th. And we are lucky enough to have you take our stage. It's called Speak Growth. And I'm so excited about it because it's the evolution, right? The first event was called Speak Beginnings. Every event is themed. And when my 2 partners and I, Fred Banny and Jason Martin, we sat down to think about what the anniversary show would be, we said, well, we have to evolve. The first one was Beginnings, very fittingly. Growth. Growth just popped into our heads. Let's do Speak Growth. It's the next level, right? It's the next evolution for us. So it's been exciting, man. It's I have a lot of business ideas. I don't often go public with them until they're sort of fully formed and it's running. And this is the first one since Launchpad that I was like, yeah, this is good. And this is going to help a lot of people. Ultimately we're trying to amplify voices in both adult and youth communities all over the world by creating these stages. We're a social enterprise as well. So we have a benevolent mission, to create stages for youth communities all over the world too. So part of what we do, our social mission, is we also work with school districts to create free Speak pop-up events in their schools. And they help us to source students and faculty, and we work with those students and faculty to coach them to become speakers themselves. We help them write their talk, we help them deliver their talk, and then we produce and MC a free Speak show in those schools. And then those people, once that event is done and it's recorded by us, they have the opportunity to get it published just like our other talk speakers. So it's just crazy, man. It's I feel very blessed right now. It's November. It's always a very reflective month for me as I'm sort of giving thanks to all the blessings throughout the year. And I have no words. We're in a good place,
Yeah, well, good for you, man, because it's when you first told me about that, man, my eyes lit up because I've always said that people need to feel seen, heard, loved, and appreciated. And what you're doing and giving so many people a voice and letting them feel heard, man, is so phenomenal. Like, of all the things you've talked about here, that to me is one of the most powerful because it gives people an opportunity to feel heard, to feel important, to feel like they have a voice. And I think giving people that opportunity to build the self-confidence of like, hey, you've got a story and your story matters, is so freaking important to just changing our community, like everything about it. It's so impactful. And I think especially even the way that you guys do it, it's not this big monumental thing that like feels so impossible to achieve. You've made it so approachable for people to just be themselves and to just share their story. Right? It doesn't have to be this amazingly overly complicated, like you went and you built a rocket and you went to Mars by yourself. Cool, now you can go speak. Right? It's like you freaking matter in who you are, and you
Yeah.
bring something to the table, and you have an opportunity to impact people if you just share your story. So for you guys to do that, to go through all of the effort and to give your time and your energy to pour into that is so freaking commendable, man. I'm so pumped to share that and to help in any way that I can to get that out there.
Yeah.
It's phenomenal.
I appreciate it, man. It's part of it was, and this is the thing that I'll say to people too. It's an important piece of advice that I think can help a lot of people that struggle as they become people of service. We were doing the TED thing for years in terms of producing shows. Now, that endeavor is a nonprofit endeavor. TED is a nonprofit organization, first of all, but as a licensee for a TEDx event, it's kind of like they give you the keys and they go, here's your license. Congratulations. Please upload the videos when you're done. Right. And there's not really that much support that comes from the parent company besides like guidance that they give you. But the one rule is that you can't profit off of a TED event. TED speakers don't get paid. TED organizers don't get paid. You make a profit on your event, you have to carry that over to the next year. And what happened was that my annual TED events were 4-month endeavors for me. From start to finish, once we chose our speakers, it was 4 months of solid work. And it was a lot. And it's thankless sometimes until the whole thing is over and you reflect back and go, that was great. But when we started Speak, it was like, okay, we need to also build a business model around this that's viable, that makes money, and not from a capitalistic standpoint, right? Not like, oh, I got to make money in everything I do. This is so important to amplify voices, to get voices out there that wouldn't normally be on stages. And I cannot do the work unless I can sustain it. And I cannot sustain it unless it is a profitable business. So I've come across people in my journey, Jim, that like there's an internal struggle of like, well, now we got to start charging if I'm going to keep doing this. And I don't know how. Look, if people will pay you to do the thing that is becoming so helpful, but you take that business or that idea, that model, and you do really good things with it, you put good out into the world, it's okay. Like there's nothing to feel ashamed about. We all have to be able to sustain this. I gave up that kind of stuff a long time ago where, look, I love my life, man. I love my house. I love my cars and my little trinkets and stuff like that. But I always kind of say, I just need to be able to support my life and my kids and feel comfortable, right? What I deserve, what I've earned in life. And after that, it doesn't matter. So there's no, in my head, there's no goals of like, oh, I need to accumulate this much wealth and this many houses and this many cars. I dropped that kind of stuff so long ago. But at the same time that I dropped it, I knew what I had to do in order to be able to continue being a person of service. And that was to build businesses around the service that I put out there, so I hope that makes sense to some people listening out there.
Yeah, it definitely does to me. We talk sometimes about impact over income. And I think people may get that twisted and like, you have to be this altruistic version where you can't make money, but you need to make money to be able to give money. Like, people, they don't connect those dots well enough. It's this on or off type of mentality, but no, yeah, you deserve to get paid what you're worth, right? And you should have no qualms about being paid. As long as you're doing the right thing with it, you're not overcharging people, ripping people off, and pocketing the money to go chill on an island somewhere.
Right.
Like if you're genuinely taking that and then spreading that, multiplying that out further, not charging money is the crime there.
Yeah.
Like you should be making money because you're going to do a good thing with it. So yeah, I agree 100%.
Yeah.
So with Speak, as someone who's kind of just interested in it, learning more or hearing some of the stories, where does someone start to get involved in that?
So in a number of ways. So our program is invite only. We've sort of, again, took a lot of the stuff that we learned from other platforms out there, and we wanted to kind of turn it on its ear to make it a little bit unique, right? So we're invite only, and you can get in as a speaker one of three ways. Our channel partners, 80% of our speakers come from our channel partners, and that is speaking coaches, PR firms, media agencies, basically anybody that represents a speaker. These companies come on board with us for memberships. They get a membership with Speak as a channel partner. And for those memberships, they have the ability to nominate speakers. So 80% of our speakers come from the channel partners. The other 20% comes from either producer invites or our internal Speak nomination committee. So every producer of a Speak pop-up event has the ability to nominate there's always 10 speakers on each lineup. 8 of the 10 must come from the channel partners. 2 out of the 10 can be invited by the producer. So there are always ways to get onto a Speak event even without having a speaking coach or a PR firm represent you. And that's getting to know producers out there and the Speak internal nomination committee. As far as other people that kind of fit those other molds, becoming a channel partner is a way to contribute because you're able to help source those voices that take our stages if you are that type of organization that represents speakers or producers. And the fun part for us is we don't limit, right? Like that's one of the things that I hated about some of the other platforms that was like, you couldn't, it was looked down on if you were a producer and then you spoke at another event or vice versa. Or, for us, it's like, we want to break those boundaries. We don't want to have limitations in our platform at all. So we've had so far 2 former speakers that became producers of their own events and killed it. And in fact, one of them not only is a speaker, not only is a producer, but she's also a channel partner as a speaking coach. So she was our first triple threat. Her name is Meredith Grundy. She's incredible. Those are the ways, to get involved right now. Keep an eye on the platform as it grows. We want to spread this everywhere we can. So having those conversations about going to different cities, different states, different countries, super important to us, as well as a program we have called Speak at Work, which is for organizations that are, a little bit larger, that have those larger size conferences internally. We have a program called Speak at Work where we actually do speak shows for companies internally, and we actually help them source internal employees, whether it's leadership or any type of employee. And we kind of do the similar thing that we do at the Speak at the School program, where we coach them, we help them write, we help them get up on stage and speak, and then we produce the entire show. So it's a multifaceted organization. There's a lot that's included in the business model that we do, but just visit the website speakevent.com. There's a tab that says how to get involved, and fill out the application, and we'll reach out to you. We're always willing to have a conversation.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So 2 questions for you. Question number 1, you got one bit of advice to give someone that's going to give them a little bit better of a day today, like one mindset, one tactical piece of advice, one thing that's going to help them live a more full life today. What would that piece of advice be?
It's that it's okay. Whatever happened, it's okay. It's part of your story. Move on, because I promise there is a tomorrow. You do not have to be defined by what happened yesterday. There is always a tomorrow, and you are the one that creates it.
That's an awesome word right there. Last question for you, maybe the hardest one.
Yeah.
What is your favorite type of cake?
Oof. So, this is a big question for a lot of reasons, because first of all, I'm a savory guy, not a sweet guy. So typically you give me a charcuterie board versus a piece of cake, and I'll take the charcuterie board 9 times out of 10. But I have gotten a little more into cake lately. So there's 2 answers. So I love a cheesecake, right? I love a New York cheesecake. My wife and I had a date night on Saturday, which was amazing. First date night in a couple of months. And we made our way to one of my old haunts. We went to Queens, to this place called Oasis, which is, it was a Greek bakery. I'm Greek, if you guys didn't notice by my last name. The church that I went to growing up in Queens before I moved to Farmingdale. And it has since turned into like a cafe with major seating and whatever. So it was like the place to be when I was younger. We went there, my wife and I, and we both had a frap, Greek nice strong Greek frappe. It's called, but a frappe coffee. And we had 2 Greek pastries, and one of them is called, it's a tough thing to pronounce. It's called ekmek kataifi, which is like, kataifi is like this kind of dough. It looks like shredded wheat, and it's like just like covered in honey. And then it's got this custard on top and whipped cream. And it's by far my favorite Greek cake. So cheesecake and the other thing. Those are my 2 answers.
Right. Good answer. Good to know. I'll have to venture into Queens and get myself some of that. Sounds pretty good. Thank you for all of your shares today. It was an amazing lesson. Speaking on legacy, on leadership, community, and I'm grateful for you and for spending the time you have to contribute all that and to share your life. It's been an honor on my side. So thank you for that.
Thank you for having me, man. First of all, I appreciate the depth of this conversation. I kind of knew it would go like this. Just like you said, you've been, keeping an eye and respect everything I've been doing. Same thing, man. I've seen the evolution of you, starting your business years ago as a kid, basically, and growing it into what it's become. And I've seen in the last few years your evolution as a man, as a father. And I'm happy that you share that journey online, because you don't talk to people every day or even every couple of months. So that to me is my favorite part of social media, to be able to see these journeys. So I've seen what you're doing, and I'm thoroughly impressed, and happy to be a brother, doing this kind of stuff. And your words about me earlier meant a lot to me. Honestly brought a tear to my eye. So I appreciate you.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate you too, man. I'll see you around the streets.
All right, brother. Thank you, man.
You got it.